My name is Aurora Lynn Hayes. The cold steel of the gavel felt like an extension of my own unyielding will, a stark contrast to the threadbare sweater I wore 10 years ago on the night my life fractured. I was 17, bleeding and pregnant. In the dead of a Minnesota winter with the temperature a brutal 20 degrees Celsius, they violently threw me out of the only home I had ever known. Their last words echoed the cruelty of the wind. "You are a tramp, a slut, a total disgrace." They severed me entirely. A decade passed, marked by relentless ascent. Now the wheel of fortune had spun, placing them, my parents, directly across the courtroom from me. They had filed a malicious, desperate suit to seize the vast Hayes Ranch, the one inheritance my grandfather left me, crushing their hopes for a financial bailout. As they settled in, their high-powered lawyer strode confidently toward the bench, and I watched their faces, still wearing those arrogant, smug smiles of certain victory. They were so blinded by their presumed influence and avarice that they didn't even see who sat above them. They had no idea they were suing the one person with the power to annihilate their entire existence. The lawyer paused, executed a deep formal bow, and delivered the one phrase that would shatter their reality. The smirk vanished, replaced by an instant sickening paralysis of pure terror. Before we continue this chilling saga of betrayal and comeback, I need your help. Where is the world watching this journey of justice unfold? Tell me the exact time and city you're tuning in from right now, so I know how far my story has traveled. Don't forget to share this unyielding tale of retribution and success with a friend who loves a satisfying plot twist, and hit that subscribe button to ensure you don't miss a single step in this ongoing fight for peace and power. The lawyer's formal greeting was the final ignition, catapulting my memory back to that night of snow and savagery. I could still feel the crushing cold of the air, tasting like sharp metallic fragments in my lungs as my father, Walter Elias Hayes, gripped my arm. Inside the lavish foyer, my mother, Beverly Ann Hayes, was screaming about my scandalous behavior, ruining the pristine legal career that was Walter's only source of self-worth. "Get out!" he roared, his face a terrifying mask of primal rage. "You will find that pauper of a boyfriend and his worthless working-class family, and you will deal with the shameful consequences of your actions far away from us." When I tried to plead to explain that Theodore Vance was a decent man, despite their classist dismissal of his simple appearance, Walter's hand swung out. The impact across my face was a sickening, brutal explosion of pain, sending me crashing against the sharp wooden railing. A sharp spasm shot through my belly, followed by the terrifying, unmistakable gush of warmth. I was bleeding. The fear for my child instantly outweighed the physical pain. Walter shoved me again down the icy steps and onto the cold, unforgiving gravel drive. "Go, and don't you ever dare to darken the doorstep of my house again." They stood framed in the warm doorway, perfectly silent, perfectly remorseless, before the front door slammed shut. The final resounding note of my childhood's death. I stumbled away, clutching my abdomen, praying the deep, constant ache wasn't a death countdown. I walked until I collapsed, visibility zero, sinking into a deep snowdrift consciousness, slipping away. Suddenly, two blinding headlamps cut through the blizzard. A dark, impossibly sleek Mercedes-Benz S-Class glided to a silent stop beside me. The passenger window lowered, revealing the intensely concerned face of Theodore Vance. He wasn't the pauper my father had mocked. He was immaculate in an expensive coat, his eyes burning with a controlled, terrifying fury. "Aurora," he commanded, his voice low and urgent. "Get in, now. We are heading straight to a trauma center." He acted with swift, decisive precision, recognizing the gravity instantly. I tumbled gratefully into the vehicle's comforting warmth, sinking into complete darkness as the car accelerated away from the brutal, snowy betrayal of the Hayes household. The world I awoke to was the vast, unimaginable reality of the Vance family. I wasn't in some local clinic. I was in a meticulously private wing of an elite Los Angeles medical center, Theodore Vance patiently by my side. He calmly unveiled the shocking truth. His simple clothes and old truck were intentional camouflage, part of his focused effort to earn his advanced doctorate in applied physics, away from the oppressive, suffocating influence of his family's dynasty. Theodore Grant Vance was the highly protected sole heir to Vance Global Tech, a multi-billion-dollar conglomerate. My father's cruel insult of working-class trash instantly became an absurdity of tragic, catastrophic proportions. Theo, using his highly sophisticated global tracking network, had located me precisely at the critical moment thanks to a panicked, cryptic message from my high school friend. He secured confidential top-tier medical care for me, moving me out of the emotionally toxic Midwest and into a breathtaking oceanfront property in Southern California. 6 months later, our strong, healthy son, Ethan Scott Vance, was born, a miracle defying the trauma and cold. Holding Ethan for the first time, the gaping wound of my birth family's rejection finally began to heal, replaced by a fierce, unconditional protective love. Yet the memory of Walter's violence and Beverly's abandonment fueled a cold, relentless ambition. I vowed to build a life so successful, so legally powerful, and so financially unassailable that my birth family would never possess the authority to harm me or my son again. Theo and I married quickly and privately 3 months after Ethan's birth. The officiant, a retired federal judge, the guest list conspicuously excluding the Hayeses. On my wedding day, I shared my ambition with Theo. I would not live a passive, protected life of luxury. I would pursue law not just as a successful attorney, but as a superior court judge, a figure of undeniable absolute authority, a power my father would be forced to revere from below. Theo simply affirmed with calm scientific certainty, "It is done. I will systematically clear the path for you." He provided the optimal resource-rich environment, elite childcare, and complete academic freedom. I approached my education with the intensity of a legal refugee. I completed my undergraduate degree with highest honors in 2 grueling years and immediately dove into elite law school. The next decade was a dizzying blur of challenging legal precedents, sleepless nights, and the balance of motherhood and ceaseless study, but Theo remained my unshakable foundation. My objective was not merely to pass the bar. It was to shatter academic records, secure prestigious clerkships, and fast-track onto the state judiciary. At 27, I achieved the impossible, appointed to the bench, becoming one of the state's youngest superior court judges, a profound position of legal influence Walter could only gaze upon with permanent corrosive envy. The unexpected news of my paternal grandfather, Elias Walter Hayes, passing briefly interrupted the stability of my new life. Grandpa Elias, a formidable, true self-made man, owned the vast, high-value Hayes Ranch in Montana, the family's authentic wealth built on integrity. The ranch had been my only true escape from my parents' status-obsessed home, and Elias had taught me to value character over cash, openly expressing his deep disappointment in Walter's cruel ambition. After my expulsion, Walter had intercepted all my attempts to reach Elias, cold-heartedly lying that I had disgraced the family and run away to a low life. The legal notification of Elias's death and the mandated reading of his will arrived unexpectedly, listing my full name as an interested party, a shocking surprise given Walter's malicious efforts to erase my existence. Theo Evelyn Reed, my trusted estate lawyer, and I flew to Montana, finding Walter and Beverly already there, looking visibly defensive and aggressive, with Walter muttering loudly about his non-negotiable rights as the assumed heir. The tension was suffocating as the estate lawyer, Mr. Thompson, began detailing Elias's substantial assets, highlighting the immense Hayes Ranch, conservatively valued in the tens of millions of dollars. Mr. Thompson paused, slowly adjusted his reading glasses, and read the distribution section with devastating clarity. To my son Walter Elias Hayes and his wife Beverly Ann Hayes, I hereby bequeath the specific sum of $1 as a final and irrefutable public record of my deepest moral disapproval and absolute condemnation of their selfish and wicked actions over the past 10 years. Walter emitted a strangled, guttural sound of disbelief, and Beverly's face went ghastly white with volcanic rage. Mr. Thompson continued, his voice unwavering. The entirety of the remaining estate, including all properties, all cattle, all machinery, all financial investments, and most specifically, the Hayes Ranch, is hereby bequeathed in full to my beloved granddaughter Aurora Lynn Hayes. He then read the ironclad disinheritance clause, which explicitly documented Walter and Beverly's decade-long pattern of prioritizing material gain over decency, culminating in the violent expulsion of his pregnant granddaughter, confirming his total detailed awareness that they had purposefully denied him access to me and the truth for 10 years. The document chillingly declared that due to their egregious and unconscionable acts of abandonment and spiritual bankruptcy towards my granddaughter Aurora, I hereby explicitly and permanently bar and disinherit them from receiving any and all proceeds from this estate. The $15 million ranch, which they had desperately counted on to salvage their deteriorating finances, was now irreversibly and legally mine-crushed by Elias's final justice from beyond the grave. While I, Aurora, was meticulously building a life of legal authority and financial stability, Walter and Beverly Hayes were karmically destroying theirs through catastrophic incompetence and moral decay. The humiliating $1 inheritance confirmed the reality obscured by their high-cost false lifestyle. They faced terminal financial distress. Walter, blinded by arrogance, had secretly made disastrous high-risk investments using client funds, and Beverly refused to curb her extravagant spending. The Hayes Ranch fortune was their only necessary lifeline to avoid total professional and financial obliteration. After their frantic challenge to Elias's will was conclusively thwarted in Montana, they sank into furious, vengeful despair. They knew they couldn't touch Theodore Vance's impenetrable wealth, but the Hayes Ranch, legally mine, became the focus of their bitter resentment. They poured their remaining funds into ruthless private investigators hunting for a weakness in my life. What the investigators found wasn't a weakness, but a horrifying confirmation of my overwhelming success: a recent high-resolution photo of Judge Aurora Lynn Hayes in a legal journal. The headline, "Judge Aurora Hayes Makes History," was a crushing blow. Beverly reportedly shattered a priceless wine glass in a fit of shock. Their rage mutated into cold, calculated terror, but the consuming need for the $15 million eclipsed their fear. They hired Richard Hall, the notorious litigator, and filed a massive, complex, intensely vengeful lawsuit in our home state. The claim was a complete fabricated allegation of undue influence, asserting I had fraudulently coerced my dying grandfather. The court summons arrived at my judicial chambers, viciously labeling me a manipulative gold digger who had cynically preyed on an old man's vulnerability. Reading the complaint suing their only child settled a cold, precise calculus in my heart. I would not just win, I would ensure the final legal and financial fallout from their malicious action would be so absolute that they would lose every last shred of the privileged life and fabricated reputation they had sacrificed me to protect a decade ago. I immediately directed Evelyn Reed to file a devastating countersuit, publicly documenting their decade of severe emotional abuse and the physical battery, utilizing my 10-year-old original hospital intake records and Theodore Vance's sworn affidavit as irrefutable evidence. This was no longer a property dispute. It was an unavoidable legal reckoning for their depravity, and I was holding the gavel. As the mandatory legal depositions approached, Evelyn meticulously built an unassailable wall of evidence around the will's validity and their malicious intent. While Evelyn focused on the technical legal victory, I prepared for the profound ethical conflict ahead. During review of the opposing team, the name of the junior partner, Jeremy Dean Thorne, snagged my attention. Jeremy was a brilliant, dedicated law student I had personally mentored while teaching advanced legal ethics, a man who passionately believed the law must serve a moral spirit, not just the technical letter. Seeing his name attached to the Hayes' ethically rotten case struck me as a profound disappointment. I had to know if the lure of a prestigious firm had corrupted his fundamental ideals. I initiated a private, confidential, and strategically non-legal meeting at an anonymous coffee house. He arrived visibly nervous. "Judge Hayes," he began stiffly, "I must professionally caution you about discussing the substance of any ongoing litigation. This is about your moral substance, Jeremy." I countered, my tone calm but piercing. "How can you reconcile representing clients who actively tried to steal an inheritance from the daughter they physically assaulted and brutally discarded onto the street in a Minnesota winter?" He swallowed hard. "I have a fiduciary legal duty to my clients. Your Honor, they presented a facially valid claim of undue influence. Facts can be viciously distorted, Jeremy. Did they inform you the disappeared daughter they slander was a pregnant, traumatized 17-year-old intentionally kicked out at -20-degree temperatures, bleeding profusely from a violent blow from her own father?" I challenged. "No, Your Honor. Their constructed narrative was that you ran away due to a scandalous, selfish affair and cynically reappeared to manipulate your grandfather." I leaned in, dropping my voice to a surgical whisper. "The man you represent raised his hand against me with brutal force. The woman you defend watched and verbally approved the violence. This is the fundamental documented justification for Elias's legally binding disinheritance clause." I calmly slid my original hospital intake records and Theo's sworn affidavit across the table. I was not intimidating him. I was executing a rigorous ethical test. Read this overwhelming evidence, then decide where your true allegiance lies. If your firm attempts to leverage any of my documented personal trauma against me in that public courtroom, I will recuse myself immediately and formally refer your firm to the state bar for abandoning the core legal ethics you once stood for." Jeremy stared at the damning documents, his face pale, his resolve hardening. "I understand your position completely, Your Honor. Richard Hall will regrettably handle the cross-examination. I give you my professional, unshakable word. I will not speak a single word that compromises my principles." I walked away, certain the necessary ethical groundwork was laid, ensuring the final court battle would be strictly focused on the law, the arena where my advantage was absolute. The high-stakes, nationally watched trial resumed in my imposing courtroom, the tension thick and absolute. Walter and Beverly Hayes sat rigidly radiating one final precarious hope. Richard Hall, the seasoned litigator, stood poised, but it was Jeremy Dean Thorne's silent formal address of "Good morning, Your Honor," that confirmed to his clients that their presiding judge was the daughter they had abandoned. The Hayes' case terminally collapsed under the overwhelming weight of Evelyn Reed's strategic defense. Hall, prepared only for a dry financial dispute, was embarrassingly outmatched. When the time came for the plaintiff's cross-examination of me, Hall attempted a weak pivot, but when he signaled for Jeremy to begin the personal attack, Jeremy stood up, took a deliberate step back from the table, and calmly stated, "No further questions for this witness, Your Honor." The profound shock and betrayal on Walter and Beverly's faces was undeniable, but before they could process this rupture, Evelyn launched her devastating counterattack. She officially introduced my verified hospital records detailing the extensive physical and obstetric trauma suffered from the assault, providing irrefutable proof of Walter's violence and directly validating the unconscionable acts clause in Elias's will. She then read Theodore Vance's detailed notarized affidavit, which confirmed his and Elias's secret sustained communication over the past painful decade, demonstrating that Elias was fully aware of my success and true character. Theo's statement contained the final crushing detail, meticulous financial records showing that the high legal fees for defending the ranch were being paid not from his vast personal wealth, but from an independent, self-replenishing trust established specifically for me by Elias himself years prior, completely obliterating Walter's last claim of undue financial duress or manipulation. The cumulative evidence was conclusive and irreversible. The courtroom watched in absolute silence as the final irreversible truth settled. I, Aurora Lynn Hayes, raised the solid wood gavel high. The court has thoroughly reviewed all evidence, testimony, and legal filings presented. It is the definitive finding of this court that Elias Walter Hayes was entirely of sound mind and free will when he executed his final will and testament, and that the explicit disinheritance clause concerning the plaintiffs was wholly and indisputably justified by the plaintiffs' own documented egregious acts of cruelty, violence, and intentional abandonment. I locked eyes with Walter, then Beverly, and spoke the final crushing sentence that sealed their irreversible fate. The court hereby denies the plaintiffs Walter Elias Hayes and Beverly Ann Hayes' claim of undue influence, and this fraudulent lawsuit is dismissed in its entirety. Furthermore, the court grants the defendant's motion for recovery of all legal fees and associated costs incurred, which are hereby assessed against the plaintiffs in the precise amount of $400,000. $400,000. That figure added to their existing undisclosed mountain of debts ensured only one inevitable terminal outcome: total, immediate, and public bankruptcy. They had gambled their entire fragile future on overwhelming greed and lost everything. As the calm bailiff escorted them away, their faces were monuments to the complete self-inflicted destruction wrought entirely by their own catastrophic choices. Later that evening, standing on the vast, peaceful porch of the Hayes Ranch, my son Ethan safely beside me, I finally felt profound emotional finality. The ranch was never the ultimate goal. The legal and public vindication of my worth and integrity was the only prize. This entire ordeal was not about settling a score for the past, but about establishing an absolute non-negotiable boundary for the future. It confirmed the powerful truth that while you are unable to select the family you are born into, you possess the ultimate inalienable power to choose the life you painstakingly build and the ethical values you enforce. I cut them off completely and permanently, not out of persistent anger, but as a necessary total act of self-preservation and peace. The single most powerful lesson I hope this story shares is that you must absolutely never allow the people who viciously abandoned your past to control the trajectory or power of your future. Success meticulously built on personal integrity and relentless hard work is the only comeback that is truly unassailable, and sometimes the kindest and strongest thing you can do for yourself is to use the full force of the legal system to enforce the ethical and protective boundaries that secure your enduring peace and future.